I want to welcome you all to the Pacific Southwest and Northwest MHTTC's Interconnected Systems Framework ISS 301, Installing an Integrated Approach. This is the third part of a three-part series on the Interconnected Systems Framework. As we kick off our third part of our series, which to me is not to say that the 101 and 201 were not important, they were foundational. The 301 is really about how we do this work, not just the what and the why, but also the how. And so we're incredibly excited to have this time together. I did just want to point out that for those of you who are joining us, we have the 101 and the 201 decks in the handout section, as well as the issue briefs that this series is built upon. So I'm going to get started. Okay, so we're going to move forward. I just want to note that we are a project of SAMHSA, and that while this conversation is definitely supported by SAMHSA, it doesn't necessarily reflect SAMHSA. And so we're going to move forward, and I, on that note, want to tell you a little bit about our MHTTC structure. So this is a lot of very, very tiny font. So Kelsey will be coming on in a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Leora. I'm the School Mental Health Lead for the Pacific Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. We are new in our launch. We're about a little halfway through our second year of being in existence. So as you can see on the very tiny fonted map, there are 10 regional centers that have different mental health technology transfer centers under SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. Today we are represented by 2 MHTTCs, ourselves in the Pacific Southwest. So you'll see if you look at Region 9, we represent the Pacific Islands, Hawaii, California, Nevada, and Arizona. And our colleagues up north in the Northwest region, as you can see, Region 10, represent Alaska, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And so we have many colleagues across the country who are all engaged in supporting the mental health workforce and school mental health workforce. And we're really excited. If this is the first time you're getting to know us, welcome. If this is the millionth time that you have been a part of one of our webinars or one of our learnings, also welcome. I want to tell you a little bit about who we are before we get to the good stuff. So as I mentioned, we are halfway through our second year. We were established by SAMHSA to provide no-cost, really training, thought partnership, consultation, and coaching, what we call technology transfer, around the mental health workforce. So really supporting those who support service users, clients, to really step into the knowledge and skill sets that they need in order to provide equitable care and to reduce the disparities that we're seeing in the mental health workforce. Concurrently, we were asked and invited by the federal government to also provide a school mental health initiative. So each one of our centers has a school mental health initiative. I, as I mentioned earlier, lead in the Pacific Southwest region, and my colleague Kelsey Schmitz, who's on also today, leads Northwest, which is what brings us today in talking about in the Interconnected Systems Framework. We're here to provide conversations so that we can really strengthen those of us who work in either school leadership or mental health leadership in schools together to make sure that all of us from a systems approach are really working effectively to support not only our students, but those who support our students. So each one of our centers, as I mentioned earlier, has regional trainings. You are on a webinar now. We also provide individual coaching and consultation, so please always reach out to us if you'd like resources or references or any thought partnership. Each one of our centers also has a newsletter, and you can get a ton of our events and trainings through that as well. All that said, you are here on the ISS 301, Installing an Integrated Approach. This is the third part of a three-part series. In October, we met to really get introduced to the concepts of ISS from Susan Barrett. We then, in the 201 in December, really learned about what does it look like to build teams, and we heard from our voices of experience in California and also in Washington. And today we're hearing from our voices of experience, not just from Susan, who's going to provide us a foundation, but also our voices of leadership and experience from Oregon and Nevada. It's really important that we lift up regional voice so that you can learn not just from the theory, which is really foundational, but also the practice as well. All of the webinars will be accessible, and the 101 and 201 is accessible at this point by YouTube link. And this session is also recorded, so you'll be able to share it as well. I'm going to invite Kelsey to pop on soon so that we can join in some shared welcoming to our MHTTCs. And I do want to say that part of this work of the Interconnected Systems Framework is not just thinking about the strategy, but also thinking about how we create teaming structures, cultures, and climate that can really lift up understanding the connection and creating connections between resources, not just tangible resources, but also leadership resources. We ourselves are resources in this work. And so Susan and our Voices of Experience, who we'll meet in a little bit, are really going to be talking about not only the what, but also the how. How do we come together as adults to do this work? And we're going to be really lifting up some challenges, as we can imagine and as we know. Oftentimes when we do collaborative and multi-stakeholder types of work, it's really challenging. And so we want to make sure that we're lifting up not only the challenges, but also some solutions. What have we known to be best practices in the ISF implementation? Again, I want to note that this is built on a 3-part series. It's also built on 3 fact sheets. So the fact sheets are in your session handouts as well. And we're really grateful that Susan partnered with us to write the 3-part fact sheet. So you now not only have the webinar recordings and links and conversations, but also some products to help move this conversation forward. So we'll start out with listening from Susan around what is the installation process, how do you kick this off from at the district and at the community leadership level. Also, how do you keep the eye on your outcome so that you're working backwards and really understanding where we're going and where we need to go in order to get there. And then we're going to shift and really learn about what this looks like in practice, lessons learned and celebrations, and then we'll close. So without further ado, I'm going to switch it to Kelsey, who's going to introduce us to Susan and who's also going to introduce us to her region's Voice of Experience, and then I'll introduce mine, and then we'll get going. Go ahead, Kelsey.
Great. Thank you, Leora. I'm Kelsey Schmetz, as Leora said, and I consider myself the Leora of the Northwest. I serve the states of Alaska, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. It's great to see so many of you here. Just a brief introduction of our lead speaker today, Susan Barrett, who serves as the Director for the Center for Social Behavior Support at Old Dominion University. She's also an implementation partner with the U.S. National Technical Assistance Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support. She assists with large-scale implementation of PBIS, partners with researchers to evaluate the impact of PBIS on students, school staff, and school communities. She also serves on the Association of Positive Behavioral Support Board of Directors and co-leads the development of the Interconnected Systems Framework, which is a mental health and PBIS expansion effort. Susan has been published in the areas of large-scale adoption of PBIS, mental health, cost-benefit analysis, advanced tier systems development, and adoption of evidence-based practices in schools. So it's great to have you with us, Susan, and leading and mentoring us in this work.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks, Kelsey.
And then for one of our Northwest practitioners, we have Dr. Jennifer Kubista joining us, as well as a high school principal, Donna Cervigna. Did I say that right? So Dr. Kubista is the superintendent at Central School District located in Independence in Monmouth, Oregon. She's a graduate of Gonzaga University, University of Connecticut, and Seattle University. She was recognized as an emerging leader and influence leader through the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development, and she has a passion for volleyball as she continues to coach high school Division I volleyball officials. She leads through continuous learning, relationships, equity, accountability, and collaborative processes focused on the development of the whole child. It's great to have you both with us today.
We're excited to be here.
Okay, great. And I have the honor of introducing our region's Voice of Experience, Casey. When I asked the Nevada Department of Education who would be a shining light in carrying out ISF work, Casey is who came up. And so Casey is the state coordinator for Nevada School Climate Transformation Project and currently works in the implementation and sustainability of MTSS. And you've got a lot of text in front of you, but what I want to lift up is many of us know some of the biggest leaders of ISF work come from those of us who have a special education background like Casey. And Casey also has worked for districts, special ed, elementary, and high school, and now is working at the state level and is board certified, and we love to celebrate that. So congratulations. So Casey is going to be lifting up the work in Nevada. Casey, I'm going to hand over the baton to Susan.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for setting us up, Leora and Kelsey. An honor to be with you on our third webinar series highlighting ISF. I am going to focus on a quick review, and then we'll start a little bit to dissect the district community leadership team. So just as a refresher for those of you who have been on our part 1 and part 2, we did an in-depth kind of analysis of these foundational elements. So we'll just do, this is a quick review. ISF is a structure and a process for education and mental health systems to come together and work in a much more effective and efficient way. And that really means that we are using a process to deliberately align and integrate our work. So it's one comprehensive single system of delivery. It's guided by key stakeholders, and this is a really big core critical feature of this work, in that it's guided by stakeholders who have the authority to reallocate resources, change role and function of staff, and change policy. So these are agency and district leaders coming together and looking at the district community level to change and integrate the systems and help support that consistently across all the schools. So we're not asking schools to figure this out. We're lifting up into that district community and asking the policymakers, the funders, the implementers, the leaders to coalesce around these concepts and move through the structure and process together as one. ISF also has 4 key messages. The first is that we are working in that single system of delivery where we have one set of teams. Too often we are working in this fragmented system where we have separate mental health teams, perhaps a climate team, a trauma team, and that oftentimes leads to fragmentation. So in the design of ISF, we actually look at the teaming structures and ask folks to merge teams together, and we want to make sure that they're committed, that they're functional, and that there's symmetry of process across all of the teams to build that alignment for all schools. We also want that team to be present across all tiers of support, and we want really to build the capacity of more staff to influence how we redesign the system. So we're really building that social emotional capacity of all staff. Key feature number 2 is about access is not enough. We want to make sure that what we do actually leads to specific outcomes. So we're going to hold ourselves to a higher standard of accountability, and we're going to choose interventions that are likely to have a specific measurable outcome. We think language is really, really important, so we're going to move away from using general terminology around how we describe what we're doing. So we're going to move away from using words like services and seeing kids to start to really drill down into what the student is actually receiving by identifying the evidence-based practice, by identifying which skills the students are working on, and then selecting the progress monitoring approach before that student starts that intervention. Number 3, mental health is for all. This is really about addressing the needs of all of our children and to make sure that we've got a prevention and promotion approach. And we have selected an evidence-based protocol and practice to teach social emotional behavior skills for all, and really specifically for kids that are experiencing mental health concerns, that we can draw on these skills to be replacement behaviors. So it's really about this call of mental health is for all. And it's also for all staff, right? We have to make sure that we're building a culture of wellness for our staff and that the organization has the capacity to pay really critical attention to that workforce. And finally, key feature number 4 is about that multi-tiered system of support. The core features in the MTSS are absolutely essential to install full mental health. And so we're going to really rely on those core features to be our guiding principles as we set the conditions for the teaming process to move forward. This slide is really about looking at some of the traditional ways that mental health is conducted in schools and moving into really redesigning the full comprehensive system. So again, we want to move away from these general terms around seeing students at specific appointments to really immersing our mental health providers, both our school and community providers, to serve on teams across all tiers and participate in a teaming strategy that helps identify the specific interventions across all 3 tiers that we help articulate as a group what the dosage and frequency and what we expect to have happen as a result of installing supports for all students. So it's really about this blended model. We want to move away from clinicians only doing mental health, really building the capacity and building out this culture that mental health is really everyone's job, and our clinicians are going to be positioned on the team to contribute to that integrated plan. So we're going to move away from case management notes to really that rigorous progress monitoring approach where we have identified a fidelity measure, we've identified an outcome measure, and again, that is determined before the service delivery actually starts. So let's dive into a little bit more details with respect to these teaming structures that we're going to set up. And we, again, want to start at that district community leadership team level. And as you can see, we've provided some examples of who should be on the team. Notice that the leaders are really at that superintendent level because they're going to design the pathways to allow this change to occur. And so while you might not need everybody around the table to start this work, we do want people in positions of authority to make some really critical decisions, allocate FTE to stay with this work and stay in this journey of interconnected system framework because it does take a while really to really seep into the fabric of change within a community. So we want to make sure that people are dedicated, they're going to come on a regular basis, but it's really got to be guided by a multidisciplinary team. And we are positioning our family and youth voice and community voice at the center of this work. We don't want this to be a team where we come together and we share out what we're doing. We really want this team to decide what to do differently together, which means that we are going to lean hard on the procedures and formal routines that got established at the team level. So at the end of the road, we end up having a very intentional, specific action plan and a very clear memorandum of understanding. And so you can see on the left-hand column, this district community leadership team really goes through this process by uncovering the current status of how things are operating and working across both education and mental health. We together, as a result of going through that study period, reach team consensus. And then we go into really rehashing the way that we have used our team. We are really clear on roles and functions. We're really clear on those procedures. We're really clear on those routines. We have just produced many, many new materials, and one of those materials we just wanted to highlight for you today is called a District Leadership Installation Guide. And that really allows a step-by-step process for the district community team to go through during this journey. We have links to installation activities, and while it may look like it's linear, we want to make sure that we're adhering to the culture and context and the journey that the voices on that team have for us. So I just wanted to call your attention to how we discretely define the installation steps. So as you're thinking about ISF and thinking about what's going on in your own community, I want to just offer some questions for you to think about right now. Do you already have a district team? If so, we do not want you to create a different one. We want to use the one we have and go through that study process together and think about ways that we could align and connect and merge our work together as one comprehensive approach. We want to make sure that our interagency partners are part of that movement forward, but it may be that while you're looking at current things and the way that our behavior is shaped as a community, it might be good to look at current service agreements, current MOUs, to really unpack the extent to which those are shaping our behavior. And that might lead to that process of kind of uncovering current status. We want to make sure that our leaders actually have the decision-making authority and are participating actively across that journey of process. And then finally, what are the operating procedures? Do you have clear communication patterns? Do you have a clear role assignment? Do you have a clear process? Do you use agenda and take notes? So thinking about the status of your community, we'd love for you to reflect on that or maybe offer an aha or a quick takeaway. And we'll ask you just to quickly type in the chat box. And I'll just pause and give you a moment to do that. And then I might ask Kelsey or Leora to come off mute because I'm having a challenge reading the chat box at the moment. So you could just kind of reflect on some general comments, that would be great, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, Susan, this is Leora. I think, and Jen and Donna are going to speak to this from their voices of experience in a bit, but I think Anne raises a really important question around how do we do the complicated but also blended and coherent teaming work when we might be in a small, rural, or more compressed resource community. So that's a strand of conversation that's coming up.
That's a perfect question and a perfect segue into listening to some of the highlights and lessons learned from our partners out in the field. So right now I'd love to turn it over to Jennifer and Donna.
Thanks for having us today. We're just really excited to share where we are and where we've come from. Let me first begin to share that I think one of the pieces that I've learned as we've gone through this process, especially as a superintendent in a school district, and part of the reason Donna's with me today is that conversation about, part of this is about the leadership you have within your buildings, not only in your principals and the hiring of your principals, but also in your leadership within your teaching ranks as well as in your classified ranks. And that's a big part of some of the stuff that we're going to share with you this afternoon. So really what I want to begin with is really our successes or our celebrations that we've had thus far. You can see our number one this past year, we actually have full-time mental health, either an associate or professional in every one of our schools. We have 5 schools total in our school district, and it was very much a need both from our student voice and staff voice to move in this direction and how we collectively do that together. I think the second celebration we have is we have spent some time this year, especially in the state of Oregon, because we do have some new legislation that's really supportive of the work that we're doing, focused on health and safety for students. And we did some community chats to really start to develop a strong strategic plan. And you can see from there, we did a lot of chats reaching out to not only our community, but to our staff as well as our students. They're a big part of that process. And you can see on that, we have really 8 objectives that will be our focus for the next 3 to 5 years in our strategic plan. But you can see right here, objective 1 and objective 2. And these are objectives identified through our community, through our staff, and through our students as 2 of the focus areas as we continue to do this work. Really focused on behavioral supports with that tiered intervention, as well as how do we help that holistic mental health support, as Susan said earlier, that we are all a part of that conversation.
Hi, I'm Donna Servigna, principal at Central High School, and I wanted to talk about our Central Health and Wellness Center. We're blessed to have a medical facility that's right across the street from our high school. It serves all of the students and families in our district, but it's great for our high school students who have consent of their own health care to be able to access that resource. And one of the things that we've put in place is a collaborative. So we meet monthly with our Polk County mental health providers, the Health and Wellness Center, Oregon Health Alliance, and then representatives from our school district to talk about how are we ensuring a smooth flow of communication so that we're not letting students fall through the cracks. So when a student is referred over to the Health and Wellness Center, are they attending, are they connected? So that we don't make assumptions about where they are being resourced and drop the ball on those students. We look at data together to see where are referrals strong, where are they not as strong, and what do we need to do to adjust to not have any gaps in servicing for our students. And then we come together around some goals. Last year, one of our goals was looking at attendance and how we could strengthen that. And so we look across our partnerships to talk about how can we message similar things to families. And an example might be our medical providers now ask families when they come in about their attendance and are they attending regularly? If not, what's the barrier, so that we can start that dialogue between what they're seeing in the community and what we're seeing at the high school and how we can be on the same page for our families.
So the next piece we just want to touch base on, this past year in 2018, we are a trauma-informed school, and Donna's going to talk a little bit further about that in the next piece. But one of the key things from a superintendent level is you have to have policies that help inform the work. And so this past year, really in 2018-19, the board adopted, and we believe we are the first in the state of Oregon to adopt a trauma-informed policy. And so you'll see our link on the presentation. We just felt it was important because you have to have quality policies, and that is what my job in the board, to really set the focus and the foundation of what the work needs to be within the schools to support our students. And then this can lead to really good positive implementation within our schools. When you have quality policies to really drive that direction, then it really helps principals and our staff, along with our community, to move in that direction.
So one of our celebrations is the implementation of being a trauma-informed school. And so you can see some of what we've put in place in the bullet points, but I wanted to talk about the importance of creating a why for staff. It was really essential that we explain what the purpose of being a trauma-informed school was. Sometimes staff think that it means that we have to know all that's happening for students, and we don't necessarily have to know their trauma to be a trauma-informed school. And so doing some training around understanding that any student could come to us, the ACEs study that's out there gives us statistics that show that it could be lots of students who have experienced trauma in their life. And so we just want to assume that that could be any student. And with policies like No Child Left Behind, where really we are changing fundamentally as educators that all of our students are our students. We don't exclude them. We don't accept that they're dropping out. And we need to find a way to reach those students and keep them engaged in education. And so those practices are really important to us. Along with the training, creating through lines, so trauma-informed is even part of our curriculum instruction and assessment. So when we talk about classroom strategies, we're talking about it from the lens of consistency for students. So when we're trying to get on the same page about strategies, that it's about safety for the students, that they aren't changing from classroom to classroom, and that we as educators are providing that safety and consistency for them. Trauma-informed for us really truly is a lens, just like an equity lens. It's not an initiative, but it's a way that we see everything that we're doing, and we're examining our practice at that level across the school. A lot of what we're doing is based in Bruce Perry's neurosequential model for education. So we're looking at the regulation, the stress scale, where students are coming to us, how easy it might be for them to flip into that red zone, and how we teach not only self-regulation for the students, but also for our adults, that a dysregulated adult can't regulate a dysregulated student. And so we need to be able to help to regulate that student, relate to that student before we can talk and reason with that student. And so we talk a lot about that. And then finally, our Power Peers, I just wanted to highlight, it's a class that we brought on. So it's our students who create a lot of the lessons that go out to our student body. So they help us implement that CEL framework and do the lessons. So it's not coming from adults, but it's coming from students. And that student voice is really important to us in the work that we're doing. Number 6, the implementation of the wellness rooms is our number 6. So K-12, we now have wellness rooms in all of our schools, and they look very different, the K-8, than they do from the 9-12, because a dysregulated student looks really different at those ages. So at the younger ages, it might look like when they get dysregulated that they're throwing chairs over, they're biting, that they're hitting other students. And often kids come into the wellness room, we want to think about when that's tending to happen, and so we're taking the breaks for them and giving them that space to come back into the green zone. At the high school, a dysregulated student might look like they're looking for an escape, or that they're just dissociating and shutting down, and so we don't see those blow-ups in behavior, but they tend to just not be in class. And so in our wellness room, what we're doing is using it as a classroom. So we're teaching students self-regulation strategies, teaching them what works best, and then helping them translate to what that could look like in the classroom. And what's been the most important to us is finding ways that we can track the data to see the effectiveness of that wellness room. So the data for us, we're doing some observations of the students, their on-task behavior in the classroom, where they were when they started accessing the wellness rooms, and then where they are with their on-task behaviors at the end. And then we're also looking at grades, attendance, and behavior referrals as part of that data as well.
So the next piece is, again, and I'm going to say from a superintendent view, it really is shifting the work that we are doing as a school district. And when I say that as a superintendent, I'm in my 3rd year. And so we have done some shifting financially within this. And so some of this is really shown in this slide here. So we have a PLC group that is made up of counselors, mental health, behavior specialists, and teachers on special assignments. And that could be, for example, a behavioral health coach that we have on assignment, or an instructional coach. We have just started this group this year, beginning in September. And this is the group that is really going to help us with the interconnected framework, because we are just in the beginning stages. We have a lot of great things going on, and now we're starting to pull it together holistically team. Part of that expansion, and I'm going to jump to 9, is we did also hire a whole child coordinator because we felt that there needed to be someone specifically at a district level supporting in the buildings and helping us develop really what we want to be able to do. This person has a mental health background. We did that intentionally. Also has a background in being in schools, but really intentional about having that mental health background as we build this holistically. I think one of the other key pieces is we have expanded really our school-based and cell expertise. As I said, in that group that we are really starting to form to build the interconnected framework, as I said, we have shifted money to hire additional teachers on special assignments as well as our mental health and professionals. And then finally, our success is really focused on, we really have a group collaboratively really starting at our K2. We have some really great work going on in the 9-12, but there are some shifts in the early learning that we are seeing, especially here in the state of Oregon. And so there's a group really focusing on professional development and how do you tie both the instructional frameworks, our instructional framework is Danielson, with our PBIS and CEL, and really giving them opportunities from a professional development to continue to blend those together as we do this holistically. Our last, just what we want to share with you is our lessons learned. I'm going to start and then I'll let Tana talk a little bit about the trauma-informed process as she came in. We really are about go slow to go fast. You have to start with what you have and where you are and then build upon that. As I came in, it was clear that we had some good foundations of PBIS, but we needed to do a reboot because holistically across all 5 schools, we weren't consistently using data, using identified data such as the school-wide evaluation tool and the tiered fidelity to really get an understanding and progress monitor what we are doing to help our culture and climate. So you can see that as part of that conversation. And I'm going to let Donna talk just briefly about the trauma-informed and then I'll close about the partnership.
One lesson that we learned, we were working through the trauma-informed grant, and within that grant had quite a bit of turnover in principal leadership, and so it does take a building leader who is committed to the work to really embed it. Like I said, it's a lens through which we do all of our work, and those through lines are really important, so it needs to be a part of the philosophy of the building leaders to really make sure that that implementation happens.
I'm going to tie that back to how I started. Great leadership can take you very far. I'm blessed to have hired, and I had 2 great principals already here, but blessed to hire 3 of the 5 principals under my tenure. The last piece I will just share is that partnership in this is imperative, but it can be a slow process. And it needs to be an intentional process, so you are making sure that you aren't causing more gaps for students as you build this process. So again, that's just another lesson learned that we continue to learn. And looking forward to being a part of this as we continue to make our learning and growing better within our school district. So we appreciate the time for being able to share with you all today. With that, Casey, it is all you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I am Casey Fleetwood. Thank you for the introduction earlier. I'm in Nevada. I'm the state MTSS coordinator here. And what I love about this topic around the district and community leadership teams is in my role, 80% of what I do is facilitate leadership teams at the district level. And in Nevada, I have the honor and challenge to support ultra-urban districts with more than 300 schools to frontier schools that maybe have only 3 schools within the district and everything in between. So the insight that I'll be sharing with you today comes from a conglomerate of experiences across those various communities and counties. So without further ado, I'm going to give you my 10 best around district community leadership teaming. And this number 1, the reduction of siloification, it seems really cliche. But with the first year often of intentional ISF implementation, this is like the buzz, right, that everyone's talking about. Administrators and clinicians and the affiliated service professionals, they all feel like they're more efficacious in their work. I want to clarify, people certainly are not working any less. It's just that their previously maybe inefficient effort is being directed towards collaboration. So it's immediately sort of gratifying that way. With number 2, the destigmatization of mental health. Honestly, a lot of communities I support have transitioned to calling it brain health. And just like physical health, you can fall in and out of shape based on whatever variables are in your life.
and giving information on brain health during back-to-school nights and community meetings, and simply just talking about it for years have really helped to reduce the stigma, which was perceived as a barrier to accessing treatment, particularly in our rural communities. Number 3, about self-care. So in pop culture right now, I think, there's a lot of chatter around self-care and promotion around individuals taking time to care for themselves, right? But in this work, when we start looking at systems to support staff with implementation, that's when we really start to see where some of those contraindicated practices and messaging exist within our system. And as sort of shepherds of the system, we've come to realize that it's kind of our job to address the systemic barriers that we're placing on our professionals before we sort of wag the finger at them and tell them they better go engage in some self-care when they're feeling burnt out because of system flaws that we're just sort of not addressing. So that's been kind of a rude awakening, but amazing challenge in local context. For number 4, school and community partners reviewing common data sources. I want to bring this back to a question that was in the chat box. I believe it was from Daniel, but like, how do you start integrating? And honestly, this has gotten a lot of traction in many communities. In one district, this is actually what really sparked the ISF movement. So in 2016, we had a school social worker, and they were sitting with the school team, and like, what's this SWIFT thing you do? Let's look at, office discipline referrals. And the site team was, going through the referrals by students with their team, and the school social worker had an epiphany. She's like, most of these kids I'm seeing, that's so cool. That makes me feel really valid. But hey, what about those kids and those names that are flying high that I don't know about? And after that, that clinician became really hooked into the MTSS system and still continues to be to this day. So sometimes that spark of what you could know or what you don't know or what we, just putting the pieces together is really, really helpful. Practice inventory. So the facilitation of practice audits or initiative inventories, my God, this is my favorite thing. So we facilitate this process at the district and the school level. And there's a new, as Susan said, they've been releasing a ton of new tools related to this ISF work. There's a new tool to capture this process that I just became savvy about a couple months ago called the ISF Initiative Inventory. But before we move to that, what I do is I have our district team sort of draw triangles on big sticky notes, and then, the practice, they sort those initiatives into tiers. But what's really different is I actually have them try to cover up each practice or initiative with a sticky note that references the data that indicates the need for that practice. So there's this old saying, for every new thing we ask schools to do, we have to take 2 away. That's a really hard ask without first identifying sort of what historical practices we might have been carrying around for sentimental or historical reasons. So as practices and initiatives change due to drift or policy or shiny new thing syndrome, we found it really helpful to repeat this process every 2 to 3 years with the district team. Because also as you bring in new community partners and other collaborators, they're bringing practices with them, right? So that's really a helpful process on number 5. Number 6, the HIPAA-FERPA thing. So oftentimes a perceived barrier that's almost a non-starter for collaboration is the very real fear of the unknown about how to talk to or with someone who's outside of either your agency or your entity. So when you're teaming, this comes back to really establishing explicit meeting norms about confidentiality, right? How are we going to protect personal information? What data can and can't be discussed in certain contexts? Now that's a real catalyst to getting things started and to ease everyone's tensions because it's tense, right? And it's important that the team comes to consensus about sort of these norms and these procedures so everyone's concerns feel addressed. And after that, honestly, it's no longer an issue. And you won't be doing the, oh, we can't talk because of HIPAA-FERPA dance for years because unfortunately I've seen communities just waste years having that conversation and getting nowhere. Number 7, connecting student data sources for advanced programming. This is a really recent celebration in one district. I was actually out there today. I already got 300 miles under my belt this morning. We were able to connect some data that's captured by suicide prevention work. So in Nevada, we have an a separate, sometimes disintegrated state agency known as the Office of Suicide Prevention. They do great things. So they help our communities with signs of suicide education days and SOS referrals and depression screeners, really cool things, right? Well, in November, when the outcome and prevalence data from those specific metrics were being shared at a community meeting, the DLT members said, hey, why aren't we using these data sources to program for Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and wrap this into our data decision rules? And, you know, what interventions are we providing within our MTSS to really respond to the needs reflected in these data? So it's really cool when you start not just pushing data out, but sucking data in and just having that continuous improvement cycle. And for number 8, keeping the district community leadership team abreast of data from sort of all levels of the cascade. So at district meetings, oftentimes, you know, we'll look at district and county level data, but what I would challenge us all to do is perhaps the next month you meet, let's look at school data. And then the meeting after that, let's look at aggregated student data so that we can keep our system cohesive. You know, in larger districts, once you get below sort of the community level, we've had to mindfully aggregate data for like trends and highlights, whereas in smaller districts, we can really get into the weeds of every school, which is very cool. All right, last celebration slide. Number 9, this refers to the graphic you'll see below. This is from one of the districts I partner with to facilitate ISF. They fell in love with the Appendix A, sort of readiness assessment from the original ISF monograph. It's on page 129. And we've sort of been administering this annually as a summative measure of our ISF implementation, and we're just sort of tracking our progress. Great trends some places, but some places do need a lot of love. And lastly, this interdisciplinary work can really redefine you as like agnostic to certain practices or settings. My center has been fortunate enough to emerge out of just working with educational settings to working in inpatient mental health facilities and juvenile justice settings and those sorts of things. So it's been a really wonderful opportunity just to do systems work regardless of the context. In terms of lessons learned, I got 3 for you. So I found that we're not nearly as effective in our leadership teams when we don't have our superintendent attending at least 80% of our meetings. There are some larger districts where this is sort of delegated to another executive level position, but I've just found it to be much less successful under those conditions, speaking accurately and truthfully. For number 2, in complete contradiction to what I just said, start with the willing. It's especially challenging to engage your community partners and state entities in the beginning. And don't worry if you won't capture all their work or change their way of doing business. Start with the people who are on board and slowly just wrap additional people in. And that's why I say we always come back to these processes of continuous improvement. It's not a one and done. So we'll get them there eventually all with us. And then lastly, you might need to become bilingual, maybe trilingual in interdisciplinary settings. So some pairing offered instead of student, we might say the student or the client. Instead of fidelity with your clinicians, you might say treatment integrity. Instead of the intervention plan, you might be talking about treatment planning. It just helps people to feel a little bit less foreign and creates more inclusive context. So if you don't know the words, just ask, and honestly, being humble will get you a really long way. So that's it for my content portion. I'm going to open it up for Leora to come back on.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you to Donna and Jen and Casey. I think what's really powerful and striking, especially from starting with Susan and then moving to the 3 of your voices, is really hearing the connection and also the different role platforms, being a principal, a superintendent, and at the state level. And so I wanted to see what common themes came up and what are some learnings that you are tying together. I wanted to lift up that we heard from Donna and Jen around the integration of trauma-informed lens and equity lens and academic coaching into ISF work. We heard many, many things from Casey, particularly I think, Casey, your last point around becoming bilingual and really being able to speak the language of different systems to build a shared language, which is actually a trauma informed principle in the continuum of everyone speaking shared language was really powerful. So I just lifted up a couple pieces that I heard, and I want to definitely invite Susan to come back on if you have additions that you'd like to talk about, particularly in blending academic frameworks with school mental health or coherent funding strategies. I know that Daniel is putting in the chat box if there are strategies around MOUs and how to kind of use MOUs as a concrete tactic to build partnerships. And I know that folks are offering resources in the chat box. So Susan, maybe if you can take 1 or 2 minutes to offer some reflections after hearing from Casey and Donna and Jen.
Thank you. That was magnificent. Thank you, everybody, for all of your input. It's so nice to see and hear from local examples and hear about the lessons learned. I think you're listening for the first time, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. We want you to know that this is a phased process, so we really lean hard on the basis of implementation with the work from the National Implementation Research Network, and we've got narratives. Our publication of our new monograph actually has narratives that will help kind of bring around some common knowledge about this work together. So we're asking folks as they look around in their own communities to folks that are doing common work to coalesce around this. And a lot of our folks are doing book studies with a new monograph, reading one chapter at a time and then coming back during the meeting and reflecting out what's different about what they're learning in the monograph and how it might impact their current work. And again, using that as part of the discovery process in this ISF. You know, there's a lot of different ways that our mental health providers, our community providers, our family members come into the education system. A lot of us are really alarmed by the data. We know that the current way of work isn't really meeting the magnitude of the problem. And we also know that simply adding more staff isn't going to solve it either, that we really have to change the system. And so doing things like book studies, doing things around listening tours in the community, doing field trips with families, and riding along in communities to learn more about what families are going through in their own communities and really learning about how to fit the context. And so there are multiple strategies that connect us in this work. It's important to be patient with each other. I think Casey said that being humble will get you a long way. I think being vulnerable in this and making sure that as a collective we all kind of say none of us can do this individually alone. It's really going to take everybody around the table to make this come together, and we have to examine the systems that shape the behavior. We can't let the way that we've written the funding streams and how they're siloed, kind of like the tail wagging the dog. We can't let that impact practice. We have to look at what's best for our students, look at the changing and rearranging the condition set, and then rewriting the funding policy, rewriting the MOUs. So another strategy could be that we all come together and we read the MOU together collectively and try to examine the extent to which how we've written the words on the page influence our approach to serving the students in our school. So I'll pause there again. I can't see that, so I feel like I'm running wildly here.
No. Thank you. And I do want to know. I also wanted to underscore that when the Northwest and the Pacific Southwest, when we initiated this series, part of this is, as we know, webinars are one avenue and also can definitely be both a helpful avenue and sometimes a limited avenue. And so there are beautifully rich conversations happening in the chat box around racial equity, around fusing trauma-informed lenses with other lenses. And so I'm just conscious of the craft that's being lifted up and also sometimes the limitations that can be held by a webinar. And so on that note, I do want to just offer that as we move into closing, this is the last of our webinar series. As I mentioned earlier, all of them will be recorded, and that all of the voices of experience from our 201 and our 301, I really recommend. I know I have it in my home office. I've printed out everyone's top 10 celebrations and also and lessons learned as visuals of really rich voices of experience. And I did want to note that the Northwest MHTTC and the Pacific Southwest MHTTC are interested. We've heard from you after these 3 conversations, are interested in potentially holding some discussion hours where it's less of us presenting to you and more of practitioners from both of our regions being able to resource one another unmuted live. And so with that, I'm actually curious, we're kind of interested in if you would be interested in having discussion hours open to you where you could talk about how to blend cultural, not only competency, but cultural humility and an anti-racism lens, or how do you actually build teams across systems. So we have this, those are just two ideas, but we have this idea to create discussion hours. So I'm going to ask if you'd be so kind, if you could answer a poll of yes or no. Like, yes, I'd be interested in that idea. I don't know what it is yet. No, discussion hours don't sound that interesting. That would be really helpful. And then we, Kelsey and myself, will send out an invitation. And the invitation we're thinking will be only going to folks who've registered and participated in the 101, 201, 301. And we're hoping to also engage folks who are our voices of experience. I do want to note these times can feel like the conversation just got started, and so we're really thinking about how to continue. I see a lot of yeses. I'm going to take that as a sign of like we're on our way. I think this is a good idea. And all that said, and I do deeply, 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 deeply want to thank Jen and Donna and Casey, who put a lot of time and deep thoughtfulness in their journey, their leadership journey for all of you on the line today. It's a leadership practice to be vulnerable with our challenges and lessons learned in our celebrations, particularly because this is an ongoing practice. And I also really want to thank Susan, who is such a forceful, fierce leader in this work, who has a vision, and has just been such an incredible colleague and teacher for us in both of our regions and across the country. I do want to offer, and so as that's coming up, I do want to note that when we do close, there will be the opportunity for you to fill out a quick survey, and I really appreciate if you do that. It's what helps us continue no-cost learning experiences. If you have desire to reach out to us, the Pacific Southwest MHTTC, our information is at the end of this deck, as well as our link to our newsletter, and our colleagues at the Northwest MHTTC. You'll see their email, phone number, website, and their newsletter as well. I know that I am on 80 bazillion newsletters, and I can never get enough. So I just really want to recommend folks to sign up to as many as possible, because that's how you can get a lot of information. And both the deck and also the fact sheets will be sent out in a closing email. And so before we close, I do want to offer us 1 minute for folks in the participant chat box to just offer one word that you're leaving this webinar with. Like, it can be a word that you heard today. It can be a word that you're feeling, interested, excited, curious, or integration, coherent. One word, and we're going to give that around 30 seconds, and then we'll close. Okay, optimistic, excited and eager. Daisy's got 2 words. Beautiful, thankful, yes, powerful, diversity. Yeah, so Anne is really asking us to really call in questions around diversity, equity, and cultural humility in this work. Energize, empower, and I hope empowerment, Jen. And again, we are going to close so that you have time to continue feedback. I do want to say again, thank you to our team. Thank you to Kelsey and Megan at the Northwest MHTTC, to Susan, Jen, Donna, and Casey, to all of you for calling in and taking time to be in discussion and learning. Please keep your eyes out for an invitation for our discussion hours. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we will be in learning with you soon. Thank you so much.